Welcome to the MS-Perspektive podcast, Perspective with a K as I'm German. I'm Nele von Horsten, MS patient, patient advocate and author. I'm bringing you interviews, inspiration and information about living with multiple sclerosis and show you ways how you can positively influence the disease and make the best out of your diagnosis. On ms-perspektive.com you will find the show notes, 11 free tips as a PDF and lots of other information. And now the show begins. Thanks for tuning in again and welcome to episode number 152. EUPATI, Empowering Patient Voices in Medical Research and Innovation with Dr. Ingrid Klingmann. And now enjoy the interview. Hello Ingrid, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show. Hello.
Hello, Nina. Thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to talk with you about one of the topics that are closest to my heart as a human being and as a professional.
Yes, exactly. And you are quite an amazing person, and I'm very happy that you came and followed my interview request. But before we actually start with the interview and talking about EUPATI and shared decision making, it would be lovely if you could introduce yourself to the audience so they know who is with me on the podcast today and how did you become involved in medical research and patient advocacy?
Okay, so my name is Ingrid Klingmann. I'm a physician. I have grown up, lived in Germany, but I'm living since over 30 years in Belgium because I got my dream job at the time under the condition that we moved to Belgium. My life dream was, when I was a teenager, to become a family physician, ideally on the countryside. And I did a lot of work and worked hard to get there. Finally, I was a specialist in general medicine and was in a general practice at the countryside. And at that time, I realized two things. One is that this is a lot of routine and does not fulfill one of my key, let's say, characteristics, which is being curious, wanting to learn about new things every day and seeing what is out there. And so in the countryside, that is routine pure. And the second thing was that I realized that there are still a lot of gaps in treating patients with different diseases efficiently. So I thought, okay, it's probably better that I look for a possibility to join the medicines development area. So I had no clue what that was, but I learned about it, found out about it, and applied and got a job. And it turned out to be my real passion, and that everything that I am and what I can do was really in the best place for that in this environment. So I learned everything about clinical trials, everything that is needed to be done there from a scientific, ethical aspect, from a scientific, methodological, practical, organizational, financial aspect. So I did practically everything that somebody can do in a clinical trial. I did it myself. I learned it and grew into it. But there was one important moment, and this was when I moved from being a treating physician to be a research physician. I got into a big ethical conflict because as a treating physician, I was educated, and the aim is to identify a patient's problem and optimal treatment option very quickly. And then to do everything that is possible for this particular patient. As a research physician, I had and have to write clinical trial protocols where I instruct the investigators, so the treating physicians of the patients in research, that they have to follow that protocol, which very often says it is randomized, double-blind, so all these methodological options that we have to reduce bias. But that means that the physician cannot decide anymore what is the best treatment for this particular patient, but he has to inform the patient, if you want to join the trial, I have no clue what you will get. I don't know whether it is active treatment or what dose or placebo, but you are participating in research, and we are so grateful that we get the data from you and your health experience. So that is a that was a huge ethical conflict. And I tried to figure out for myself how I can justify being this type of research physician, and not a treating physician anymore. And in that context, let's say the standard of good clinical practice was developed at that time, which allows um, researchers, physicians, to perform clinical trials in an optimal way, meaning optimal concerning the protection of the participants and the reliability of the outcome of the data generated, that justify that research is done to the benefit of other patients. So I got very much involved into this good clinical practice standard development, dissemination, application. I have meanwhile trained thousands of people, professionals in that area, about how to apply good clinical practice. But what I also learned at that time was that all the different players involved in clinical research and the development of new treatments have very different backgrounds and very different levels of knowledge, and hardly anybody has really a broad knowledge. So it is really important to bring people together to find solutions, people from different backgrounds, different stakeholder groups, to enable them to understand or to come to a pragmatic, real solution. At the beginning, I was involved in not-for-profit associations who developed this type of collaboration, enabled that. And so at the beginning, when I did that 30 years ago or so, it was mostly between clinical researchers and ethics committees. Then more or less clinical researchers in pharma companies and in academic institutions, in hospitals. But already since about 2000, I have experienced myself how important it is to enroll patients into these discussions, to have their perspective, to have their experience and their knowledge. And this was really very impressive. Also, then became also at some stage for myself, because I had many years ago I had breast cancer, and I experienced at that occasion that the physicians talked with me very differently than with all the other patients, because we could discuss the different treatment options. We discussed them from a scientific point of view, from a practical point of view. This was really on eye level. And the other patients with whom I had to deal in that hospital and experienced how they were interacting with their physicians, it was very clear that this was very paternalistic, that the patients were not in control of the discussion, that they were anxious, that they did not understand what was recommended to them, but they had still to make a decision on what they wanted to do, but they did not feel comfortable in making that decision. And that creates a lot of fear. And that was then the time when it started for me to think, okay, I have to do something systematically to help patients to better understand how the medicine's development process works, what are the relevant, the critical aspects to know, and what does it require to become self-confident enough and knowledgeable enough to be a partner for the treating physician, and not, I don't want to use the word victim, but to be somebody who is dependent.
Yeah, so that was probably the beginning of EUPATI. And maybe you can describe it a little bit, how it started and what were the major challenges or resistances you encountered in the early days? Because I think the paternalistic physicians at the beginning had a little bit of a problem, or maybe they welcomed all these well-informed patients.
Well, yes, the sometimes it is like this in life. I got the opportunity because I was working in this not-for-profit environment with the different stakeholders and working on this topic on how to involve patients into this whole process in an efficient way. There was a small EU-funded project called Patient Partner, where I became a consortium partner. And the aim of that project was to find out systematically why patients are not partners in the medicine's development process. And so we did big surveys and interviews and focus group meetings and everything that you do in such a project in different places in Europe. And there was one very clear outcome, and this was that, yes, the patient communities are super interested in becoming partners in this process. There are many people who would like to proactively pursue that opportunity, but that there is no capacity of people who know enough about the medicines development process to be able to give meaningful advice to the clinical researchers. Because complaining about, oh, I have so many problems, it's so bad to live with that disease, I have so few options, etc. I would need this or that or that. That is not sufficient. The researchers need information, topic, ideas, contributions that are giving them a possibility to integrate them. Not everything that patients propose can really be turned into reality, because there is methodology, there is science, there is budget, there are many constraints why a proposal from a patient cannot be easily translated into reality. So patients need to understand that and need to pre-filter, so to say, their own suggestions and contributions to make sure that what they say has a chance to get realized. And this requires understanding of the process, needs understanding of how to apply different methodologies to be able to be successful, etc. So the lack of a cohort of patients who can fulfill these consulting roles and contribution roles, that was the biggest hurdle. So we used that result and proposed a project to the Innovative Medicines Initiative in Europe at the time. That was a collaboration between the European Commission, the Directorate Research and Innovation, and the European Association of Pharmaceutical Industries, FPR. This was a big, and it still exists. It has now another name. It's now called Innovative Health Initiative, but it's still the largest public-private partnership in the healthcare sector in Europe. So we made a proposal to IMI at the time to say, look, patient centricity was the hot topic already at that time, but nobody knew how that could be turned into life. No, it was a lot of lip service, but nothing else. So we said, okay, if we educate systematically patients in that process, then and create and increase this cohort of people who are able and willing to do that in the different institutions, then we are going to make progress. And so we came with a proposal to create a cohort of, let's say, a key group, a core group of people who really learn the medicines development process, from all the aspects that the pharmaceutical medicines researchers learn, but not from how do I prepare a protocol, how do I prepare an investigator's brochure, but how do I review, how do I comment a protocol, how can I give input into the design of the trial, etc. So that was accepted. And we proposed at the time or promised that we would educate 50 patients to a diploma level, and that 100,000 people in Europe would use our material that we were developing in an open forum in freely available websites with information on all steps in the medicines development process that everybody can read and in lay language that can be easily understood, and that we would translate it into the 7 most frequently spoken languages. So 100,000 users and 50 fellows, EUPATI fellows, that was the aim. And I'm super happy. And sometimes in life, you need to think about what worked well and what did not work well. But this one here really worked well, because meanwhile, we have over 8 million users worldwide, and we have over 500 patients educated already. And we have in different countries now, so to say, satellite EUPATIs, where this type of course is also offered in national languages to the national population. So we are systematically, like a snowball, like an avalanche, system, increasing the capacity of people that are able and willing to play that role, to make these contributions, but also, and I think that is equally important, to over time really increase the health literacy generally, so that people better understand how the treatment development works and what they really need to know from a physician to be able to judge on the treatment that they are getting, on the side effects that they are seeing, on the options that they have for further improvements.
Yes. And big congratulations on that achievement. It's really great. I mean, I'm now one of these fellows. It took me a while due to family planning, but finally I made it. And I think at least I tried before, and I still keep trying to raise health literacy on my podcast on the topic of multiple sclerosis. So, I mean, of course, you mentioned already a lot the benefits that are there for patients, but what are also the benefits for the pharmaceutical industry and the healthcare system overall with these educated patients?
Interestingly, the group that is the hardest to convince that this is good are the physicians.
Mhm.
Treating physicians, by definition, think they have been educated to understand what patients need. They see patients every day. They know what patients need. And to make them understand that it's really not any type of criticism, but really helpful to involve patients in the decision making, but based on a scientific understanding of what needs to be done and what really are the options. That is something that is not really generally accepted. So that means we still need to work on that. Pharmaceutical industry and CROs were much more receptive because, in fact, this concept fulfilled one of their major needs. Because they are desperately looking for patients who can meaningfully contribute to their developments and to their different methodologies. So the question is really for them how to get to this cohort. So they are very, very supportive. They are interested. They are collaborating. In EUPATI, there is a very good collaboration with pharmaceutical companies. Interestingly, when we created EUPATI, we were thinking that the content would come from the pharmaceutical companies.
Mhm.
But in fact, it was not. The pharmaceutical companies, the people there had too many other things to do. So ultimately, it was independent, consultants, independent experts that were preparing the material, that were, refining the material, that were reviewing our editorial board. These are all people that have a lot of experience in that environment from their own careers, but are independent. And I think that has also, helped a lot to increase our acceptance, no? Because
Mhm.
there was certainly a bit of suspicion. There's industry involved, and what does this mean? Is there any bias, or is there any perhaps intention for influential activities? That is not the case. No, so the way it is now organized, handled, dealt with, is really completely neutral and open for everybody. And meanwhile, the community improves the material further and contributes to the material, and that is really helpful.
Great. And I'm pretty sure you have a lot of examples, but can you maybe share one example from your experience where patient involvement truly made a difference? Maybe if you have something in mind which is related to neurological problems, it's more interesting to my audience, but it could be something else, of course.
Now, yeah, we are seeing this on all fronts now. You know, the medicine's development process, it has many, many different steps, and patient involvement can occur at many different levels. No, patient involvement can occur at the very beginning when a decision needs to be made on which symptoms or which treatment features do we want to achieve with our new product. And of course, when patients come and say, well, for example, in Parkinson, the tremor is not such a big problem. Only a certain cohort of Parkinson patients has really a tremor problem, and we have other treatment already. But we want to sleep. We want finally to sleep better. Then this is very important information for a pharmaceutical company, because then they can say, okay, which substance do we have? Can our substances that we have here under development in preclinical, is there potential that this or that particularly relevant symptom could be meaningfully impacted, or even a healing be achieved? So this very early input on unmet medical needs is very, very important, and is very much in the center of interest now altogether. But then there are also later on steps where it is really important that patients are involved. And so, for example, I know that many different companies have meanwhile in their different indication-specific departments, patients who help them defining the details, for example, of the study protocol. How um, is it ethically and organizationally possible for patients with this disease um, to come frequently to the hospital, for example, for frequent patient visits? Is it possible and acceptable for them to do these and these assessments so often? Or would there be a need to find out other ways to collect data from them? So a lot of patients are meanwhile supporting these type of input opportunities that pharma companies need, and patient organizations in the different areas of indication wants to do. But there's also another area, and this is the communication with the patient. So we have different moments when communication to patients is super important. That is, on one hand, during the recruitment process, making patients aware that a clinical trial is out there,
Mhm.
whereby there are, of course, ethical considerations in how far should a patient recommend to other patients to join a clinical trial. No, that is difficult, that is critical, but at least information that there is research out there, that there are clinical trials, or this or that clinical trial that is um, potentially interesting for a patient, and giving more explanations on what does randomized mean, what does double blind mean, what does it mean in practical terms, what help perhaps also with the understanding of the risks versus the benefits in that clinical trial. That is where a lot of patients and patient representatives are involved and help in practical terms a lot, which helps with ultimately getting the recruitment into the trial done faster, meaning the study can be performed faster. And ultimately, if that is done then in all the trials, the drug can be available faster to the market. That is the interest for the pharma companies, but it is also a key interest to patients to get access to a new treatment faster, because it takes years from finding the substance to really get marketing authorization, even in different regions in the world. So patients are interested in principle to help speeding up the process. And so helping with recruitment, reducing, let's say, the fears of joining research, participating in research is one particular area. And that happens now on broad front. So I cannot give you an exact example, but on the other hand, it's also communication continues when it is about the informed consent that is prepared for the patients, and finding the best approach, the best wording, the best way of explaining the relevant aspects to patients with that disease can best be done by other patients who have experience. And towards the end, when the results are available, we do now a lot of efforts, especially here in Europe, to communicate the trial results to the patient population, to those who were involved, but also to all the patients with that indication. And for this, we have now so-called lay summaries. That is a legal obligation for the sponsor to prepare a lay summary 1 year after the end of the trial. But preparing this lay summary in a meaningful way and disseminating this lay summary in a meaningful way, that is where patients are really needed and helpful, and where they are involved already nowadays.
Yeah, I remember you and some other colleagues of yours giving fantastic examples of how that could look like, with a lot of visuals, for example, compared to just horrible amount of text.
And figures.
And figures, yes. So who can benefit most from EUPATI today, and how do different levels of engagement, so the full training versus the individual models, make an impact? I mean, you mentioned there are 500 EUPATI fellows compared to 8 million users of the EUPATI material.
Yeah. Now, I think this the publicly available information in EUPATI. So if you Google, it's www.eupati.eu. There you find all the material in meanwhile 14 languages. And so I use that sometimes, and I know that a lot of other also researchers and healthcare professionals, etc. They all use that. If you want to have quickly an understanding, what is the issue with liability insurance? How does this work? What do I need to know about? I go into EUPATI, I Google, or internally, I search for liability insurance, and then I get a piece of information in the language that I want, that I can tick at the right bottom of the top. I can get a quick understanding in lay language what this issue is about. And so I think using this material really ad hoc when you need it here or there, you have a question and you want to know more about, using this source of information is a very important first step to increase the knowledge about this process. And we have seen that the more and more people understand the process, understand the details, understand how things fit together just by from time to time going into this, looking into, perhaps talking with others about it, better understanding where are my questions, where are my concerns, increases the interest in the topic. Because one big, in the patient partner project, one of the first outcomes was that only about 10% of the population is interested at all in that topic, knows about that topic. And out of the 10% who are interested, only 1 or 2% said we have a relatively good knowledge about how that works. And these 10% were mostly people who either had fallen sick or have somebody in the family or in the circle of friends, where suddenly they got an interest or raised an interest for understanding what options are there, what can I do, what is this world about? And so increasing that level of interest is a very important part. And I must say, everybody's complaining about COVID. For this environment, COVID was a miracle because suddenly everybody was interested in research and what new research is out there, and how do drugs or vaccines be developed, etc. So for the interest in that area, this was really a boost. What we need to achieve is that this interest remains. But so that is the first way, the first moment to increase step by step their own knowledge, their own digging further into the options. Also in preparation of a doctor's visit. Well, what is this drug really, and what is known about that drug? There is lots of information out there. For example, we have from the European Medicines Agencies, but also the FDA has that. We have the Summary of Product Characteristics, the SMPC, which is for physicians, but still a compilation of everything that is known about the drug. And looking into such an SMPC, and for every drug that is on the market, such an SMPC exists, that can be found in the internet. Patients can see which aspect they do not understand and then start digging into that. And that is how we have also seen now in EUPATI, since we have this possibility of having all that information available, that patients more and more want to learn systematically, so that they really take a whole module of information and then, for example, they just start do just one module on clinical trials or on HTA or whatever. They do just that because that is the area that they are interested and that is available for a very small amount. And this they can do. And then we see that more and more patients are now taking more and more modules. And at some stage they say, I'm now nearly through that program. I have nearly everything. So I sign up for the last step, which is 2 face-to-face events where we do all the exercising and the discussions and the application of everything that has been learned. And this is how we grew now from, at the beginning, 50 patients per cohort. We are now at the moment at 100 to 130 patients per year who really fully sign up to this program and want to become a EUPATI fellow.
Yeah, I remember in my cohort it was a little bit over 100, and I think from 40 countries
Yes.
and from around the globe. We had, I don't know if we had somebody from Africa, but for sure we had
Yes.
from South America, from North America, from yeah, everywhere, more or less.
Meanwhile, it is global because it is available in the different languages.
Yeah.
So how the whole South American continent is reachable through
Portuguese and Spanish.
and we have Portuguese also as a language. English in the Asian countries, we have it also in Japanese.
Mhm.
So it's has also been translated into Japanese, so we have local, national, enthusiasts, so to say, who agree to do the translations in their own. In their own activity as an own activity, and then these translations were then put on the EUPATI website and are now available to everybody. The course is in English. But we have now more and more people really from all over the globe, including Africa, including all the Southeast Asia and Middle East, South African, America, Canadians. So it's really, meanwhile, more and more global.
Which is great, yes. And I remember you gave one great presentation about innovation in clinical trials. What trends do you see towards more inclusion and accessibility?
Personally, I have gone through that experience that pharma companies started to contract out many of their activities. When I started in that environment, that was unthinkable. But then pharma companies realized they cannot do everything themselves anymore. The whole development becomes global, it becomes more and more complex. So companies have started to contract out, which created a whole new business, which is the CRO environment. When I started, there were 1 or 2 CROs in Europe. Now there are way over 1,000, 2,000 CROs. So it is a normal thing to contract out. Nobody is questioning that strategy anymore. In contrary, it is only about how to do it in the most efficient way. And personally, I think in 10 years from now, patient involvement will be such a normal part um, of the development environment of new treatments that people will have difficulties to remember how it was before patients were involved. I think this train cannot be stopped anymore. And should, of course, not, but it will not. So that means we need to work more and more on the sophistication of that input from
Mhm.
all stakeholders. And we have spent a lot of efforts now on educating patients to prepare themselves for that role. But we realize now also in EUPATI, well, we realized from the beginning, but we couldn't do it for budget constraints, that also those who engage the patients need to better educate it and need to learn how to do that in the most efficient way. And in a professional, ethically correct way. And this education of the other side, so to say, in industry, CROs, and academic institutions, that is something we are working very much on it because it is a partnership, and we need to make sure that all the partners in that process are really professional, are optimally using that fantastic opportunity and make the most out of it. So for me, that will be a normal part of the medicine's development process in 10 years from now at the latest.
That is good. So what makes the EUPATI network, including the national platforms and fellows, so unique and valuable when you are done through the system?
Um, that is a very interesting question. The big difference is that when you are working in different professional environments, the people learn how to do things and how to apply things in the best way, and how to increase their competence. When we interact with patients, that is a different thing. Patients are concerned. They are for them, this topic is an element, a dominant element in their life. That is a very different type of quality. So the input of patients is very different. It also causes partly a problem because, for example, we have ethics committees who were really against or even refuse still to involve patients in the assessment of clinical trial protocols because they are um, yeah, afraid that patients are concerned parties and
Mhm.
therefore not as objective as all the other professionals who are asked to join an ethics committee because of their professional competence. So the contribution of patients has a completely different quality. And that is also the I think the only real difficulty in that constellation that is that people have to be aware on all sides that this is a particular quality, that this is a particular constellation, and that this requires particular understanding, empathy, competence in soft skills also. How to make sure that this particular knowledge and competence that patients can bring to the table is not blocked or underused or hurt by purely stupid things like interaction, treating, values, respect, and professional collaboration.
Mm. Looking into the future, what development in the field of medical research would you like to see over the next 5 years?
Yeah, my big, big topic is we do, of course, a lot about decentralized protocols, meaning this is the attempt to avoid that the patients have to come so often to the clinical trial site, but that we generate more and more opportunities that clinical trial activities can be done at the patient's home or
Mhm.
by people in their healthcare professionals in their environment. So there is, of course, that it has a lot to do with IT technologies that can be used here. There also the regulatory environment needs to be adapted to that. But here in Europe, we have one big problem, and this is our geographical fragmentation. That means when a pharma company decides, I want to do a trial as quickly as possible. I want to recruit patients as quickly as possible. They go into different countries and enroll hospitals in that country. But then these hospitals are practically limited to the patients from their country. And especially the small countries, of course, have very little patient
Mhm.
numbers that might be suitable for a particular trial. So we have identified this as a particularly big problem in Europe and are working on figuring out what to take away all the hurdles that patients envisage when they want to participate in a trial in another country. So it's for the patients, but also for the investigators who want to enroll patients from other countries, because a lot of them don't want to do that because there are so many administrative and ethical and financial hurdles. It is a multi-layer issue, and there is a large initiative that we have created in EFGCP, in the European Forum for Good Clinical Practice, again together with FPR, which is called EU-XCT, Cross-Border Access to Clinical Trials, where we try systematically to take away these hurdles or to reduce the hurdles that patients and investigators face so that it becomes a normal right of patients to participate in a trial wherever the trial takes place, wherever it is suitable for the patient to join.
Yeah, that would be very lovely if that could be achieved pretty soon and that
Yes,
it's not a headache for everybody involved.
exactly.
What still needs to change so that patient involvement becomes a natural and consistent part of research? Because I guess it's still not everywhere totally natural yet.
That's right. But I think it can only be persistence that helps here, creating more and more opportunities at as many occasions as possible. And here the patient community has quite a bit of options, because on one hand, the patient organizations become more and more sophisticated in connecting with researchers. Very often now also in academia, no? There is still a bit the hesitation with industry, but which is not justified in my personal opinion, but it is there for some people. But in academia, we have also a lot of research that is ongoing. And here the hurdle is lower because the researchers are the treating physicians. And so if patients would start to ask their physicians, are you participating in a trial? Is there a trial outside where I could perhaps benefit from an improved treatment option, or where I could get access to diagnostic activities that I usually would not have because my healthcare system does not pay for it? If patients would look into that option and systematically make clear to physicians, to treating physicians, that participation in a clinical trial is not something that is a horror to patients, or they may lose their patients when they ask them, but that in contrary, the patients consider this as a meaningful and important opportunity for them to get access to innovative treatments, that would over time have an impact on this hard to reach group of physicians, so to say, to do more and more research, and in this way to get more research opportunities into our populations.
Yeah. How do you see the role of digital tools in improving patient education and participation?
Unlimited. I think we will. We are only at the beginning of seeing what options we have here. I think despite all efforts and all learning, we are still amateurish in using the opportunities that we have, the options that we have. And I would really like to want to encourage to try out to work as hard as possible, because that can only help to further reach out to patients, to reach patients that are perhaps otherwise hard to reach, that have not been involved in that environment. And suddenly, through a podcast or whatever, they hear there are possibilities, and I have something that I can do. And I think that is the most important message that we should try to achieve in patients' mind. This is, I can do something. I'm not dependent on others. I'm not a victim. I have possibilities to become a master of my destiny. And everybody who has a disease learns over time to live with that disease, but sometimes better and sometimes less. And sometimes the disease is impacting the life a lot. And then, of course, this dealing with a disease is more difficult and more time-consuming and more challenging than in other cases. But also there, we need to ensure that patients understand I can do something for myself, because this helps with the confidence, and that helps with the optimism to be able and wanting to change something, and not to become passive and just accepting what is there. There is nearly always more that can be done than people are aware of. So
Yeah,
I think we really need to increase this optimism and self-confidence with concrete opportunities to learn, to develop that knowledge, and to become active, to move away from passive attitudes to active attitudes.
absolutely. Becoming active makes you so, pushes away the frightening parts of your disease, and shows you the options, and then you can
Yeah.
become really a person in the driving seat, and not looking at how your life goes on without you
Exactly.
doing
And I
something.
think that is, of course, it also gives the opportunity then to meet others, and to learn that you are not alone with this problem, and that others have experienced that as well, and learn what they did, or what options they are aware of, talking to each other, exchanging experiences. Um, Wanting to hear more opportunities is always helping to make a person stronger in dealing with its own life's challenges.
Fantastic. Ingrid, thank you very much for that great interview. Is there any final message you want to leave on top of what you already mentioned?
Well, of course, the plea, please look into EUPATI, look what is in there for you, use it, um, make use every opportunity that you can find to make your voice heard, that this is done in a sophisticated way, in a meaningful way. Let's come away from the moaning and complaining. Let's get into activity mode. Thank you very much for this opportunity here.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed the interview, learned something new, and maybe even got inspired to do a EUPATI training on your own. Even though the program is quite successful, there is still the need and place for more patient advocates. By the way, next time I will have another interview guest, and this time it will be about how exercise boosts your immune system, what people with MS should know, with David Walczyk. As you might know by now, I love the sports topic, and it's really fascinating what a positive impact is coming by exercise. So please tune in again, let other people know who might be interested in the podcast, and rate it wherever you are listening to it. And meanwhile, please stay as positive and healthy and active as possible. And here next time. Bye. Thank you for listening today. I hope you found it helpful. You may also be interested in the previously published episodes and posts, which you can find at ms-perspektive.com/podcast. Perspective with a K. You can also get a free PDF with 11 tips for your positive impact on MS at ms-perspektive.com/newsletter. If you'd like to get in touch, you can reach me at nele@ms-perspektive.com or on social media. See you next time.